Welcome to the Hidden Corners, where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur, as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
And this is Book 4 of the Wolfman Chronicles again. Chapter 11, The Blue Mist. And this takes place in Alaska, Mexico, Russia. The Legend of the Blue Mist. The legend of the Blue Mist dates back to a time long forgotten, when the land was ruled by powerful tribes and the spirits of nature held sway over the hearts of the people. It was said that on certain nights, when the moon is full and the stars align just right, a luminous blue mist rises from the surface of the lakes and the rivers, swirling and hovering in the frigid night air. According to the elders, the blue mist is not merely a natural phenomenon, but a manifestation of the spirits who once inhabited the land, the souls of those long departed, who are now bound here on earth. On nights when the moon is hidden and the air is deathly still, the mist rises and glides silently over the water and creeps onto the land. Fishermen and canoeists who find themselves enveloped by the mist are said to mysteriously disappear. People camping along the water's edge are never seen again, their campsites left abandoned and untouched. Locals tell stories of hearing ghostly sounds and feeling an icy chill just before the mist appears. They believe that the spirits of those taken by the mist are trapped within it, their souls forever bound to the waters. Sasha slept restlessly through the night, dreaming of the strange child she had seen running up the path. The child was always just out of reach, and her mysterious, eerie laughter haunted her dreams. The child's face was a blur, as if she wore a mask. The dreams were fragmented and unsettling, filled with images of the dense forest closing in around her, the ghostly blue mist rising from the creek where she had taken her nap. She awoke in a cold sweat, her pulse racing. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to seep through the thin curtains. She reached out and she felt Jack beside her. There was comfort in knowing that he was there. He would protect her from her fears, both real and unseen. She curled herself around his warm body and she drifted back to sleep. In the dream that followed, Sasha found herself back at the beginning of the path. There were more flowers than she even remembered. The path that was bathed in the soft gray light of dawn. She found herself following the trail, marveling at the beauty all around her and the heady perfume of the flowers drifting on the air. Her breath was visible in the cold morning air, yet she did not feel a chill. The forest was eerily silent, not even a bird song or a slight rustle of the leaves. After what felt like hours, she emerged into a small clearing, and in the center stood an ancient, weathered tree, its gnarled roots twisting into the earth. At the base of the tree lay a large, flat stone, where she saw something that made her blood run cold. A small, tattered doll, its face smeared with dirt, staring up at her with lifeless eyes. The doll was wrapped in a piece of fabric that looked strikingly similar to the dress that the child had been wearing. Now in her dream, Sasha bent down to pick up the doll and a sudden chill washed over her. She felt as if she was being watched. She looked up to see a blue mist slowly rising from the forest floor, creeping towards her like a living entity. The air grew heavy. She was having trouble breathing and felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The mist pulsed with an ethereal light, casting an eerie glow over the clearing. Panic set in as the mist enveloped her, the cold seeping into her bones and causing her to shake uncontrollably. She tried to move, to run, but her legs felt like lead. She heard whispers all around her as if 1,000 voices were whispering her name. And just as she felt she might be consumed by the mist, a voice broke through the cacophony. It came from far away, yet she knew that voice. Her heart pounded in her chest as she looked around, desperately trying to find the source of the voice. The mist began to swirl, forming the faint outline of a child. And just as the figure reached out to her, she heard the voice again, closer. Closer. She awoke to find Jack with his hands on her shoulders, shaking her awake and calling out her name. It took her a moment to focus. Was he here with her in the clearing? The fog of the dream lifted and she realized that Jack was here beside her. She was in her bed and in the bedroom of the big house. "Sasha, are you okay? You were shaking uncontrollably, violently, like you were having a seizure. You wouldn't wake up," Jack said with a concerned look on his face. "It was a dream," Sasha replied. I was back in that clearing with the tree and the rock, and I saw that child again. And a mist, a blue-colored mist, and it was crushing me, almost like it was sucking the soul right out of my body." She put her head on Jack's chest and sobbed. "Well, maybe we should leave," Jack commented. "Get away for a while. The wedding is coming up soon. We need to prepare for our flight to Mexico and let Grizz know we'll be gone for a few weeks." Sasha took a deep breath to calm her nerves. "Yes, I think it's just the excitement of this new place and everything that's happened the last few weeks. It's just gotten to me. I'll be okay, really, Jack." "Well, let's get some coffee going and then we'll drift down and check on Grizzly. We'll finalize some plans today and we'll get our tickets purchased. We need to make sure your new passport and ID have arrived so you can fly without any worries. And I need to get used to calling you by your new name, Mrs. Savannah Moore." Sasha laughed. "What made you choose the name Savannah? And when were you going to marry me to make it official?" Jack laughed. "Well, we've got to get through Juanita and Julian's wedding first. I have a feeling it'll be as big and gaudy as attending Carnival in Brazil. And what? You don't like the name Savannah?" Sasha shrugged her shoulders. "It's a nice name, just surprising is all. I would have thought you'd chosen a name like Anne or Debbie, something that wouldn't draw any attention at all. Savannah kind of stands out. It's different." Jack grinned. "It's the first name that came to my mind when I was filling out the paperwork. I just pictured you as a Southern belle, fresh from Georgia. We're going to have to work on that accent of yours, though." Grizzly was sitting on the porch drinking a cup of coffee when Jack and Sasha drove up in the truck. His face was drawn and tired, and Jack could tell the pain was getting to him. "Hey, old man, did you take your pain meds last night?" Jack inquired as he walked towards the cabin. "What are you, my damn babysitter?" "No, I didn't take my painkillers. I couldn't find them. I figured you'd hid them from me," he grumbled. Jack shook his head. "Now come on, you know I wouldn't do that. They're right there on your bedside table, Grizz. You gotta remember to take them. They help you sleep and you'll be a damn sight less grumpy in the morning." Grizzly gave Jack the finger, went back to drinking his coffee. Sasha came walking up the cabin path slowly, her eyes glued to a story she was reading on her phone. Jack noticed that Grizz's eyes brightened just a little at the sight of her. She had remained in the truck until now, attempting to get the phone charged while the truck was running. There was normally no cell reception this far out in the wilderness, but occasionally a slight signal would come through in the clearing if the satellites in the sky were in just the right position in their orbit. She had picked up the signal that morning and was checking the news bulletin when they arrived at Grizz's cabin. Sasha had a grim look on her face. "Well, what's wrong?" Jack could tell something was bothering her. She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I just heard this on the news, Jack. Jasper and Malign Lake and all those places we just visited, gone." "What?" Jack and Grizzly both asked at the same time. "The lake that we just camped at, and that pretty little town of Jasper, even the lodge we stayed in, they're all gone. She showed Jack the page on the phone she had taken a screenshot of. The headline read, "Canadians mourn as Jasper, Jewel of the Rockies, burns." The fierce wildfire which swept through the Canadian town of Jasper in recent days melted cars to the road and turned homes to ash after a 328-foot firewall swept through late on Wednesday. It has been difficult to get a sense of the scale of what happened because the fire has burned out of control for days. Some 25,000 people were evacuated from the town of Jasper as well as the nearby Jasper National Park in Alberta. At least 358 structures in town have been destroyed, along with at least 89,000 acres by this fire, which was caused by a lightning storm. Sitting just north of the more popular Banff National Park, Jasper National Park is the largest in Canada's Rocky Mountains. The UNESCO World Heritage Site is home to elk, grizzly bear, moose, and bison. The adjacent town of Jasper has a population of about 5,000 and accommodates roughly 2.5 million people who pass through to visit this park every single year. Among the devastation is the historic Malign Lodge. "Jack, we were just there," Sasha cried, "and I thought it was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. It's just so hard to believe it's all been reduced to ash." Jack put his arms around her. He had seen wildfire destroy parts of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, and California. He knew that revegetation and regrowth of a tourist economy can take decades. His heart ached as he thought about the years it would take for the forest to recover, for the scars to fade, and for the local economy to bounce back. But it was also a grim reminder of the danger they faced, the danger anyone faces who chooses to live in a forested wilderness. If a fire blew through their property, there would be no quick assistance. There was no volunteer fire department in the tiny town of Circle, Alaska. Fairbanks was the closest city, and it was 162 miles away. Jack filed away the thought in his mind to ask the townspeople in Circle if anyone was interested in a volunteer fire department. He'd be happy to take the lead if he could find a few others willing to participate once he and Sasha were settled into the new home. With fire prevention on his mind, Jack excused himself to go chop some wood for Grizzly. The old man refused at first, but knowing he wouldn't be able to get out there and do it himself, especially with the bum leg, he went ahead and agreed to let Jack do it. "Yeah, you gotta pay for your keep somehow," he grumbled. Sasha refilled his coffee and sat on the porch next to Grizzly. "There's something I want to talk to you about, Grizzly," she said. He turned toward her and frowned. "As long as it's not girl stuff," he complained. She smiled at him. "Oh, Grizz, you're such a character. No, it's not girl stuff. But it is strange. I had the weirdest thing happen yesterday. You know Jack left to take you to Fairbanks to the doctor, and I stayed home. Well, I decided to take the dogs for a walk, and at the far end of the meadow, you know, the one in front of the big house, well, we found a path. It was incredibly beautiful. There were flowers everywhere, and they looked like they'd been recently cared for, groomed, you might say. There were these beautiful rocks placed on either side of the path, and flowers planted all around them. It wasn't like the chaos of random wildflowers. They looked like they'd been carefully planted, cared for. Did you do that?" He looked at her quizzically. "Were you drinking?" he asked her. "Of course not. It was morning. I wasn't drinking, and it wasn't my imagination. Do you know anything about it? Have you ever seen it? I wondered if maybe Jezebel planted them, but they'd be overgrown and wild by now. This looked as if it was just recently tended to." "No, I can't say I never saw that. And I don't remember Jesse planting any flowers. We were too busy getting the house built," he replied. "Well, the strangest thing happened. I had the dogs with me, of course, and I followed the path all the way through the forest. There was only just a slight decline to the path, but it meandered through the forest and ended up right at the water's edge. I think it was probably Birch Creek. At the mention of Birch Creek, Grizzly's eyebrows perked up. I was sitting by the stream, Sasha continued, and I guess I was just daydreaming, but I fell asleep. I woke up to the sound of laughter, and I saw this little girl. Now, she was dressed in a long white gown, and she was quite a distance from me, so I couldn't really see her face clearly. I called out to her, but she turned and she ran. And yet, she kept looking over her shoulder at me, and it was like she was beckoning me to follow her. Now, I realized the dogs were missing, so I ran after the girl so I could ask her if she'd seen my dogs. She was always just several paces in front of me, and I could never catch up to her. But if I stopped, she stopped. And if I walked, she walked. But if I ran, well, she ran on ahead of me. And then I must have fallen and hit my head, but the next thing I knew, Jack was waking me up, and I was lying on a large, flat boulder in the middle of a circular meadow. The dogs were there, and it was so strange. I had flowers tied all through my hair. Grizzly, I didn't do that. There were also flowers in a circle all around me on that rock. Well, Jack started calling the dogs, and we were heading home, but the dogs wouldn't leave the meadow. Jack had to carry them across the border of the meadow and on into the forest. And once they were in the forest, then they ran home like something was chasing them. And we must have been on a different path because there were no flowers. Grizzly stared at Sasha in silence. Then he looked straight ahead and he began talking. Sasha, I didn't want to say anything to you and Jack. You'd just think I was a crazy old man. But there are things here in this forest that have no explanation. I've seen things that no one would believe. And I ain't about to tell you, 'cause believe it or not, I kind of like you, and I don't want you running off scared and not coming back. Sasha laughed at that. Seriously, I live with a werewolf, Grizzly. I can turn myself into a wolf, and I don't think anything you tell me will be stranger than that. Well, you got a point there, Grizzly replied. I guess I can tell you a few things. He paused and he took a few more gulps of his coffee. Now, staring straight ahead, Grizzly began his story again. You ever hear tell of old Miner Bill? I suppose not, you growing up in Russia and all that. Well, old Miner Bill was a friend of mine. One of the few men I would call a friend. He liked to come up here to Alaska every now and then, and, well, he made quite a name for himself up in Estes Park, Colorado. He was a lot like me. He liked to be left alone. Now, I never been to Colorado myself, but old Miner Bill, well, he loved it up there. Said it reminded him of Alaska. We had done some gold panning together when we were young. I actually met him right up there on Birch Creek, right where you was yesterday. Well, one day something scared the bejesus out of old Miner Bill, and he decided to leave these parts. He tried to talk me into coming with him, but I had my claim and my land, and, well, I hadn't seen what he'd seen anyway. So Bill packed everything up. His cabin still sits out there just above the creek a ways. He decided to go up to Colorado and search for gold up the Platte River, and ended up finding some on the Thompson, and then he just built himself a cabin up above Chasm Falls in that there area called Rocky Mountain National Park. He never acquired a deed to his land. He just built a cabin there, dug a mine, and settled in. Well, anyway, I talked old Bill into telling me what he saw, just before he left for Colorado. It took some doing now. He was pretty scared. Now, he said that he was out there on Birch Creek, and he saw this blue mist rising up off the water. He heard weird noises, and he felt like somebody was watching him. He took off a-running, and he swears this blue mist followed him. Every time he looked back, he saw this blue mist right behind him. And then he sees this girl, a little girl, just like the one you saw. He says that little girl motioned for him to follow her, and she was urgent, like she was going to help him get away from that blue mist. So he follows her. Sure enough, that blue mist disappeared. But now he's in this meadow, and he's lost, and that little girl is nowhere to be seen. He says it's a big circular meadow, and in the center there's a big old flat stone with several other smaller stones circling that. He figured it must be a Native American thing, or first Americans. Some sort of relic from when there was lots of them around these parts. But he sees something on top of this rock, and so he walks over to take a look. And there, laying on that there rock, is a doll. It looks handmade, and it's wearing a long white dress, just like that little girl was a-wearing. He said he got the eeriest feeling that that doll was alive. Well, he didn't touch it. He just left, but every time he went to the edge of the meadow, just before entering the tree line, he got a pressure in his chest like he was having a heart attack. It was just like the meadow didn't want him to leave. He kept trying, but he just couldn't take that step into the forest. Says it was like something was holding him there. And he says the forest seemed to be closing in on him, like it was reducing itself towards that center stone. Well, like I said, it scared the bejesus out of him, and then he heard this sound coming from the trees, and he saw the blue mist floating through the trees, circling him. He started hearing laughter, like a child's laughter. Well, he thought it must be dreaming or hallucinating or something like that, and then something happened. He's not sure what, but the next thing he knows, he's laying in the middle of that meadow, laying right there on that big flat rock, and he's got these flowers laying all around him and over him, just like you said. And his head hurt like there was no tomorrow. But he just got up, brushed the flowers off of him, and he was able to walk right out of that meadow. It was daylight now, so he knew he'd been there all night to sleep on that rock. Well, it shook him up something terrible. Sasha sat there staring at Grizzly with a look of terror on her face. This morning, I had this dream. I was back in that meadow, and there was a large flat rock with the smaller rocks all around it and a doll, just like you described, and it was laying on that rock. But it was a dream. Now, what do you think this means? Well, sweetheart, I think it means that there are some damn mysterious things here in these woods, and that's only the beginning. After old Miner Bill left, well, I started seeing some things too. No, I never saw the little girl, but I seen a blue mist one night. I was down on the river doing some night fishing. There was this blue glowing mist coming right up off the river. Now, we get fog sometimes, and pretty thick fog, but this was different. It seemed to be illuminated, like it was lit from within it. It floated just a few feet above the water. Well, I quickly gathered my things and moved into the trees. And it floated towards me, slow motion like, and literally landed in a tree just a few yards away from me. It felt like it was watching me. Now I cussed that thing out, and I cursed it from here to high water. I think whatever it was just figured out I was too ornery for it, 'cause it just turned and drifted back to the water, and it disappeared. But it shook me up pretty good. And then, of course, I seen figures in the woods, lots of times. Not little girls, mind you, but big figures, bigger than a man by far. They watch me sometimes out at that tree line. I guess they figure I ain't no threat, 'cause they ain't never come up to me. I hear them out there sometimes, though, walking on the porch planks. But they ain't never caused me any harm. They ate my chickens, though. Those guys are big and hairy. I assume they're Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever you want to call them. But I don't bother them, and they sure don't bother me. Now, old Molly, she gets scared by them sometimes. I hear her stomping her feet in her pen and crying out. But she's so damn ornery, too, that they seem to lose interest in her. Sasha smiled. I guess there's just a lot we don't know about living here. Oh, you don't know the start of it, Grizzly replied. We got werewolves, wolvens, we got Bigfoot, we got those little fairy children like the one you saw. We got blue mist coming up out of the water, mysterious lights at night. And I'm not talking about no northern lights neither. I'm talking full-fledged orbs of light that come out of the sky and shine like a light bulb, then quickly fly away as fast as they came. Oh, you'll find out Alaska's full of mysterious things. Jack came walking around the corner carrying the axe in his hand. Grizz, I'm going to sharpen your axe a bit before I chop any more wood. He pulled up a chair and he sat with Sasha and Grizzly. Grizz has been telling me about some of the mysterious things you've seen around here, Sasha said. Well, I'd like to hear some of those stories, Jack says. Well, tell you what. You come back tonight around dusk and we'll have ourselves a campfire. I'll tell you the story of what happened to old Miner Bill once he got to Colorado. He swore that blue mist followed him all the way over there. And maybe we'll see some of our Bigfoot friends. They seem to be drawn to the fire. Jack looked over at Sasha and raised his eyebrows. Well then, I guess I'll bring the whiskey. And I'll make s'mores, Sasha replied with a smile. Now over in Mexico, Julian was standing on the veranda with Juanita. Now what's your plan, Juanita asked. Well, the wedding's only 2 weeks away. I know you've got all kinds of things to do before then, so Montoya should be the last thing on your mind. Let me deal with him. He's got 2 little girls, so I don't want to kill him. But Juanita, let me do it my way. No chupacabras. I'm going to sit down with him and have a conversation, just man to man. And if he doesn't see things clearly, then I have my method of getting through to the man. I don't like it, she replied. Juanita, Julian sounded exasperated. Let me deal with it. This is the man who is in love with my woman. It should be me handling the situation, not you. I'm putting my foot down on this. Well, Juanita was used to being the one in control. Even over her brother Miguel, she was strong, fierce, and unwavering in her resolve. The chupacabra ordeal had failed to intimidate Montoya, leaving her frustrated and anxious. The failed plan gnawed at her pride. Could she relinquish her command and let Julian handle things? Could she, just for a moment, allow him to take charge and be the man? These questions weighed heavily on her mind. Juanita had built her life on being self-reliant, on never needing to depend on anyone. And that is why her other marriages and relationships had failed. But she did want it to be different this time with Julian. She glanced at him, standing on the edge of the veranda, looking out over the fields with a contemplative expression. His confidence and calm demeanor were really reassuring. She was hot-tempered and fiery, the exact opposite of him. Maybe she should step back and trust him to carry out their next move. What could it hurt? All right, Julian, she said, finally her voice firm but tinged with an uncharacteristic vulnerability. She hated feeling out of control, but this new feeling, one of trust and collaboration, well, it was kind of nice, she decided. Meanwhile, Nadia injected the solution into Ivanov's leg. He had told her what she wanted to know, and now he was of no further use. She watched, with no emotion, as he drew his last breath. What do I do now, she wondered. The organization would be contacting her soon. They would want to know what she had found out, where the jewel was hidden. How could she tell them it was in the possession of Sasha Molovaska? She knew it was her father who had stolen it, but he was merely a mule, a man who did whatever he was told. But then, isn't that what she was doing now? Doing exactly what she was told? She didn't like to think that she was so much like her father, a pawn doing the organization's bidding. But now her father was dead and her mother was hiding the jewel. She wondered why her handler had put her on this case with Ivanov. There was plenty of others who could have handled this one. He was easy. Was it because they wanted her to find out? Was this just another one of their tests to determine her faithfulness, her loyalty to the cause? A million thoughts were going through her head. She could ask to be assigned to this case, travel to Alaska and hunt down her mother, steal the jewel and hand it over to the organization. In doing so, she'd probably have to kill her, most likely, and that would be the final closure to her childhood. She would, from that day forward, be owned fully by her handlers. She would fail to exist on her own terms. She'd just be a tool and nothing more. Did she want that for herself? Or was this possibly the escape she had hoped for and dreamed of? Was there ever truly an escape? She knew that anyone who ever tried to leave the organization was swiftly and silently dealt with, never to be seen again. Could she take that chance? So many mixed emotions. Would her mother even know her? Would she recognize her mother? It really hadn't been that many years, yet it felt like a lifetime since she was a young girl in her mother's arms. Nadia's phone buzzed. It was Vidya, her handler. "You're still in the building. Why?" Nadia looked at the dead Ivanov lying on the bed. "I was just leaving." She ended the call, gathered her things, shutting and locking the door behind her. She would leave out the back way, down the stairs and through the back exit where her Ducati was parked. How nice it would be to get on her bike and ride away, far, far away from the organization, from the killing, from the responsibility and the constant pressure from her handlers. But she also knew that if she even tried, she'd be dead by morning. Her phone buzzed again. It was Ivan this time. Nadia, get out of there now. Head to the safe house. I'll meet you there. She paused for just a second. Ivan, I'm going to Alaska.